He was just 17, the favorite son of a shepherd, wrapped in colors that would seal his fate and dreams that would change a nation. But favor is dangerous when jealousy burns in the hearts of those closest to you. One moment, beloved, the next, betrayed, sold by his own brothers, thrown into slavery, cast into prison on false charges. Yet through every pit, every chain, every closed door, God was weaving a plan that would turn a slave into a ruler, a prisoner into a prince, a forgotten brother into the savior of nations. His name was Joseph, and this isn't just a story about dreams coming true. It's about how God can take the worst betrayal and use it for the greatest good. In Canaan, Jacob had 12 sons, but he loved Joseph most deeply, the son of his beloved Rachel, born in his old age when hope had almost died. Jacob gave Joseph a magnificent coat of many colors, vibrant blues, rich purples, brilliant reds and golden yellows, a coat fit for a prince, marking Joseph as his chosen heir. But this gift became a symbol of division. Joseph's 10 older brothers burned with jealousy. They watched their father's eyes light up when Joseph appeared, and with each passing day, their resentment grew deeper. Joseph didn't understand the storm brewing around him. He walked proudly in his colorful coat, unaware that every thread was weaving hatred in his brothers' hearts. He was his father's joy, but he was becoming his brother's torment. The family was fracturing. Love had become favoritism. Gift had become grievance. And while Joseph slept peacefully, his brothers lay awake, plotting in the darkness. Then came the dreams, visions sent from heaven that would reshape the destiny of nations. Joseph couldn't keep silent about the revelations that filled his sleep. "Listen to this dream," Joseph told his brothers excitedly. "We were binding sheaves in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers' faces darkened. "Do you intend to reign over us?" they demanded. "Will you actually rule us?" They hated him even more. But the dreams didn't stop. Joseph saw the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowing down to him. When he shared this, even Jacob was troubled. "Will your mother and I and your brothers actually bow down to you?" Jacob rebuked him publicly, but privately pondered these things. Something stirred within him, a recognition that these weren't ordinary dreams, but glimpses of God's future. The brothers saw only arrogance. They didn't realize they were witnessing prophecy. God was revealing his plan through a young man who would one day hold their very lives in his hands. One day, Jacob's sons took the flocks to graze near Shechem. Days passed with no word, and Jacob grew anxious. "Go see how your brothers are doing," Jacob told Joseph. "Check on the flocks and bring me word." Joseph set out, his colorful coat bright against the dusty road. But when he reached Shechem, the fields were empty. A stranger directed him to Dothan. In Dothan, the brothers saw him coming from far away. That distinctive coat was unmistakable. "Here comes that dreamer," they said. "Come, let's kill him and throw him into a cistern. We can say a wild animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." 10 grown men stood ready to murder their own brother. Jealousy had grown into hatred. Hatred had become conspiracy, and conspiracy was about to become murder. Reuben, the eldest, heard their plan, and his heart recoiled. "Let's not take his life," he urged. "Don't shed blood. Throw him into this cistern, but don't lay a hand on him." He secretly planned to rescue Joseph later. The brothers agreed. When Joseph reached them, greeting them with joy, they showed no mercy. They seized him, stripped off that hated coat, and threw him into an empty cistern. Joseph's cries echoed from the pit as he pleaded with them, but they sat down to eat. The brother they'd once played with now lay trapped below them, and they ate their bread in peace. Reuben stepped away, unable to bear Joseph's anguish. He planned to return and rescue him under cover of darkness. What he didn't know was that merchants were approaching on the horizon, As they ate, Judah saw a caravan of Ishmaelite merchants approaching, their camels loaded with spices bound for Egypt. "What will we gain if we kill our brother?" Judah asked. "Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. When the merchants drew near, they pulled Joseph from the cistern, 20 shekels of silver. That was the price they set on their brother's life, less than the cost of a good donkey. Joseph begged them to reconsider, but their hearts had turned to stone. They watched as the Ishmaelites bound Joseph and led him toward Egypt. His colorful coat lay abandoned in the dust, but his cries echoed until the caravan disappeared beyond the hills. When Reuben returned, he found only an empty pit. In anguish, he tore his clothes. "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" But it was too late. Joseph was gone, sold into slavery, and his brothers began weaving the lie that would break their father's heart. The brothers dipped Joseph's coat in goat's blood. The beautiful garment became evidence of cruel deception. They returned home and presented the bloody coat to Jacob. "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." Jacob recognized it immediately. "It is my son's robe!" he cried. "Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for many days. All his children came to comfort him, but he refused consolation. The very brothers who caused this tragedy offered hollow comfort while guilt ate at their hearts. "I will mourn until I join my son in the grave," Jacob declared. And so he wept for Joseph, while the son he mourned walked in chains toward Egypt, very much alive, but lost to his father forever. Meanwhile, far to the south, God was already at work. What looked like the end was actually just the beginning. In Egypt's slave market, Joseph stood with other captives as buyers examined them like livestock. The coat of many colors was just a memory now, but the dreams God had given him still burned in his heart. Then came Potiphar, captain of Pharaoh's guard. He looked at the young Hebrew slave and saw intelligence in his eyes. For 20 shekels, Potiphar purchased Joseph. But Joseph was no ordinary slave. From his first day, it became clear that God had not abandoned him. Everything Joseph touched prospered. Potiphar noticed this and began entrusting Joseph with greater responsibilities. Within a short time, Joseph was put in charge of Potiphar's entire household. The Lord blessed the Egyptian's house because of Joseph. All of Potiphar's affairs prospered. Potiphar had complete confidence in him. God was preparing Joseph for something far greater than managing a household. He was learning to lead, to organize, to handle vast resources, skills he would need when the fate of nations rested in his hands. As Joseph matured, he grew into a handsome young man. Potiphar's wife noticed him and was captivated. She began making advances toward him. "Come to bed with me," she demanded. But Joseph refused. "My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" Day after day, she persisted, but Joseph remained firm. He avoided being alone with her. But Potiphar's wife was not a woman who accepted rejection gracefully. Her desire turned to fury. One day, when the servants were away, she grabbed his cloak. "Come to bed with me!" she cried. Joseph ran from the house, leaving his cloak in her hands. He chose his purity over his position, his integrity over his comfort. Potiphar's wife burned with rage. Clutching his cloak as evidence, she called the servants. "This Hebrew slave came to make sport of me," she said. "When I screamed, he left his cloak and ran." When Potiphar came home, she repeated the lie. Potiphar's anger burned against Joseph. Without investigation, he had him arrested. Joseph was thrown into the king's prison. Once again, he found himself in a pit, not the dry cistern, but a dark dungeon where hope seemed distant as the stars. From beloved son to trusted servant to condemned prisoner, Joseph's life seemed to be spiraling downward. But even in prison, the Lord was with him. Even in chains, God's favor rested upon him. The warden noticed that everything Joseph did succeeded. The prison ran more smoothly when Joseph was involved, and slowly the young Hebrew began to rise again. Prison was not his destination. It was his classroom, and the lessons he was learning in chains would prepare him to break the chains of famine from an entire nation. Time moved slowly in prison. Joseph had been forgotten by the world above, but he had not forgotten the God who had given him dreams. Then came two new prisoners from Pharaoh's palace, the chief cupbearer and chief baker. The captain of the guard assigned Joseph to attend them. One morning, Joseph noticed both men looked troubled. "Why do you look so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there is no one to interpret them." "Do not interpretations belong to God?" Joseph replied. "Tell me your dreams." The cupbearer went first, describing his dream of a vine with 3 branches that produced grapes for Pharaoh's cup. Joseph's eyes lit up. "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will restore you to your position." Then Joseph made a request, "But when all goes well with you, remember me. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison." The baker eagerly shared his dream. 3 baskets of bread on his head, with birds eating from the top basket. Joseph's face grew solemn. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will execute you." 3 days later, both interpretations came to pass exactly as Joseph said. The cupbearer was restored, but the baker was executed. The cupbearer returned to his place of honor in Pharaoh's court. But as days turned to weeks and weeks to months, he forgot about Joseph. 2 more years passed in that dungeon. Yet God's timing is perfect. The cupbearer's forgetfulness was not a mistake. It was part of the plan. Joseph needed to wait until the exact moment when all of Egypt would need him. He stood by the Nile. 7 fat, beautiful cows came up from the river. Then 7 ugly, gaunt cows came up and ate the fat cows. Pharaoh woke with a start, but when sleep returned, another dream came. 7 healthy heads of grain grew on a single stalk. Then 7 thin heads, scorched by wind, swallowed the healthy heads. When morning came, Pharaoh summoned all the magicians and wise men of Egypt, but when he told them his dreams, none could interpret them. Then the cupbearer finally remembered. Like a lightning bolt, the memory struck him. A Hebrew slave in prison who had interpreted dreams with perfect accuracy. The cupbearer stepped forward. "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh once imprisoned me and the chief baker. We each had a dream, and a young Hebrew interpreted them for us. And things turned out exactly as he said. I was restored, and the other man was executed. Pharaoh didn't hesitate. Bring him to me at once." Messengers ran to the prison. Joseph shaved, changed his clothes, and walked toward the palace. After years of waiting, he was finally being called to fulfill his destiny. The great throne room of Pharaoh stretched before Joseph like a vision. Gold gleamed from every surface. At the far end sat Pharaoh himself. "I had a dream," the king began, "and no one can interpret it. But I have heard that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." Joseph's response revealed his character. "I cannot do it," he replied, "but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." Even in the presence of absolute earthly power, Joseph acknowledged the higher authority that had guided his life. Pharaoh recounted his dreams. As he spoke, Joseph listened intently. The survival of nations depended on what would happen next. "The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same," Joseph began. "God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. The 7 lean cows and thin heads of grain are 7 years of famine." A murmur rippled through the throne room. Famine in Egypt. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow. The famine will be so severe that the abundance will be forgotten. Joseph didn't stop with the problem. He offered the solution. "Let Pharaoh appoint a discerning man to take charge of Egypt. Collect 1/5 of the harvest. during the 7 years of abundance. Store the grain in the cities. This food will be held in reserve for the 7 years of famine. It was brilliant. Not just an interpretation, but a complete strategy for survival. The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and all his officials. Pharaoh turned to his advisors. Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God? Pharaoh addressed Joseph directly. Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Pharaoh removed his signet ring and put it on Joseph's hand. He dressed him in fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. The prisoner had become a prince. I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt, Pharaoh declared. People shouted before him, "Make way!" At 30 years old, 13 years after being sold into slavery, Joseph went throughout Egypt, no longer as a captive, but as its ruler. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced plentifully. Joseph organized the massive collection effort. He established storehouses in every city. Joseph collected all the food produced and stored it. The harvest was so abundant that he stopped keeping records. It was beyond measure, like the sand of the sea. During this prosperity, 2 sons were born to him. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh. God has made me forget all my trouble. The second he named Ephraim. God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. Joseph's journey reveals a profound truth. What men intend for evil, God can transform for good. But this was only the beginning. The dreams spoke not just of personal triumph, but of a moment when his family would bow before him in desperate need. The famine was coming. The real test was about to begin. Joseph was ready, but was his family?